Hi, I'm Stephanie Strange. Want to hear something scary?
Día de los Muertos. It was Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead. I eagerly set up our family's altar. It's a tradition that goes back almost 3,000 years. A day to celebrate those who have died, and it's usually our ancestors. We set up the living room with photos of our deceased family members, along with candles and special treats to commemorate each of them. This year was different because my abuela had just died. I was still heartbroken and took extra care with her offerings. I placed tiny skulls made out of sugar in front of each of those who had passed. While the altar stays lit, it's customary to go outside and celebrate with our neighbors, telling stories of those who died to honor them, while also celebrating the life we still have. As the music festival began to play outside, my parents were in good spirits. My brother, Antonio, on the other hand, had just entered puberty, and if being a menace was an occupation, he was a CEO. My parents asked us to finish placing treats on the altar while they went out to meet the neighbors to dance. While I was putting the skull candies in front of each member of the family, Antonio was eating the leftovers out of the bag. Not a complete defilement, but rude, no doubt. I simply rolled my eyes, and then at one point he tried to lightly kick the table to see if he could knock anything over, forcing me to work harder. I tried not to give him attention, but he was getting on my last nerve. Before we were about to leave to join our parents, I looked at my abuela Tute's photo and I pulled out a special treat, a bottle of Pepsi, which was her favorite to splurge on, as I poured a glass for her on the altar. Boo! Antonio jumped out from behind the door with a skeleton mask on and scared me half to death. Thanks a lot, you jerk, I shouted. I had spilled soda all over the tablecloth. I went to grab a towel from the kitchen. When I returned, the skull candy in front of Abuela's photo was gone. I turned to ask Antonio if he knew anything and saw him chewing, and that was it. I ripped the bag of candies from his hand. I informed him I would tell our parents and he'd lose his phone for a week. He jumped up, swearing it wasn't him and that he didn't touch anything on the altar. We stormed into the kitchen, still arguing. I put away the candy, and then we heard a bang coming from the living room. We rushed back in to see what had happened. Checking the altar, that's when I saw all the skull candies were missing. Then the temperature dropped instantly. I turned to scream at Antonio, but saw true fear in his eyes. He didn't take the skulls. We were not alone. As if to confirm this, a breeze ran through the room. I rushed to close up the window, but it wasn't open. Another gust blew the candles out. It was now pitch black except for a tiny ember from the candle in front of Abuela. The flame looked as if it was trying to reignite. Antonio grabbed my hand and slowly we crept towards it. The flame then grew bigger and bigger. But it wasn't fire. We looked closer. Could it be? She began crying out in Spanish, flames licking her face as she spoke, but she wasn't looking at me. Her sights were set on Antonio, who was in complete shock. She screamed at him without warning. She lunged from the flame, grabbing him by the throat and pushing him up against the wall. She threatened that if he didn't behave, he would be next on the altar. She then suddenly softened. She let go of his neck, slowly pacing his feet back on the ground. She wiped away his tears and dusted off his shirt. She said, "Now be the good boy, I know you can be." Then she floated my way, and without saying a word, she embraced me with the biggest smile of pride and showed me her hand. It was filled with the candy skulls. She winked and then began to eat them one by one as she moved back towards her candle. She grew smaller and smaller until the light went out and the temperature rose again. Our parents burst through the door, laughing and dancing and asking us to hurry. We stood there frozen from the encounter. It took a moment to realize that there was light, warmth. The altar was back to its original state. Everything was as it should be. A lot has changed since the Dia de los Muertos. Antonio has been on his best behavior since. We couldn't be closer, and the photo of Abuela now has a cheeky little smile that wasn't there before. And only Antonio and I know the story behind it.